Well, we are in 2 Kings chapter 5. If you want to find your place there tonight. 2 Kings chapter 5, and we are, of course, studying the life of Elisha. And this is one of the more interesting miracles that is associated with Elisha, in my opinion, and more meat there theologically. I've preached this story before, and I don't know. I think I've preached it for y'all. I know I've preached it. If not for y'all, then in Ghost of Churches Past, I have. But there's a lot here to kind of unpackage, and a lot of things that we can certainly apply to ourselves and to our day and age for sure. So let's dig in. It involves the healing of a Syrian soldier named Naaman. I'm in verse 1 of 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria." Who's she talking about here? Elisha. "For he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Thus and thus said the girl who is from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened, when the king of Israel read the letter, that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me." All right, let's talk about this. So Naaman is a soldier, officer in the Syrian army. He's able to achieve some notoriety. He is great and honorable, verse 1 says, in the eyes of his master. So my question is, how did he achieve this success? How was he able to achieve this success? Exactly. If you look in verse 1, he was great and honorable in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. So there's a couple of things here. One is that we see that the Lord had given Syria the victory. Syria didn't win because they were a great and mighty army. They had won the battles they had won because the Lord had given that. Now this is an interesting thing, because Syria wasn't a nation that worshiped the one true God. This was a pagan nation. Their king was pagan. Their people were pagan. But I think it tells us that God is in control of history. And he not only uses his people, he uses everybody to accomplish his will and his purpose. And I think that's comforting in our day and age, where it seems, if you look at the news, it seems as though evil is winning the day. It's kind of depressing. I don't watch a lot of news because it all seems depressing to me. But I take comfort in the fact that God is still in control of history. And God is using nations, He's using people to accomplish His purpose and His will. Even nations and people who don't know Him or serve Him, He's still using them. So that's kind of part of it, but then also that applies to this man Naaman. he he had achieved great success, but he had done it because the Lord had used him to win these battles. So it wasn't that he was such a great commander, it was that God had given him the success. And I think it's important that to whatever level of success we achieve in this world, it's important to remember that that's because God chose to let us do that. It wasn't because we're somehow smarter or better or whatever than anybody else, but that God chose to do it that way. But Naaman, for all of his success, he has a problem. And what is that problem? He has leprosy. And at that point, leprosy, in that point of history, leprosy basically meant you were doomed to live a life of isolation. You couldn't really be around people. You probably went and lived in a leper colony or something, and there was no cure for leprosy other than a supernatural cure. So it was about one of the worst things that you could have was leprosy, as far as what it meant for you socially, what it meant for you religiously, and physically as well. So he has leprosy. He's achieved a lot. He is well liked in the king's eyes. He is a well liked guy, but he has this problem of leprosy, and nobody can help him. No doctors can help him. The king can't do anything to cure him. But he has this girl that's working in his house, helping his wife out, and she says, "Oh, if my master could just see the prophet in Israel, I know he could do something about it." Now, tell me how this girl, who is this girl? Where'd she come from? How'd they get this girl working for them? Yeah, so basically on some of these Syrian raiding parties, they're raiding their neighbors, and Israel happens to be one of Syria's neighbors, and so they raid. They do a raiding party into Israel, and they capture people and they make them slaves. And this particular girl apparently becomes a house slave in Naaman's house, helping Naaman's wife out. And so she is the slave to Naaman and his wife, but she knows something that Naaman doesn't know. She knows there's a prophet in Israel that can do great things. He has healed dead people. He has miraculously fed people. He's done all these amazing things, and he was an understudy to Elijah. So, man, if Naaman could, if there's just some way that he could get to this prophet Elisha could do something. So Naaman says, "Hey," he goes to the king. He says, "Hey, this girl that we've got working for us, she says that if I could just get to this prophet Elisha in Israel, then he could do something about it." The king says, "Oh, well, if that's the case, I'll give you, I'll send you on, and I'll give you a big gift to give him," because that's kind of the way it was done in those days, particularly in pagan circles. You go to a prophet, you go to a seer, you go to a holy man, you give him an offering, and he does a miracle for you, healing usually, or some sort of blessing like that. And the bigger the miracle required, the bigger the offering you have to pay. That's kind of how it worked. And so, hey, this is a big one. We're going to get a cure for leprosy. So I'll give you, I'll take care of the big offerings. So 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, 10 changes of clothes, and a letter he writes to the king of Israel. And this is what the letter says. When I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you that you may heal him of leprosy. Now, this is all the info that the king of Israel gets. So it doesn't say, I've heard that there's a prophet that can heal him. See if there's any of your holy men that can do this. I hear about this guy named Elisha who's supposed to be able to do something. All it says is, I'm sending Naaman, my servant, to you to heal, so that you can heal him of leprosy. Now, the king of Israel reads this letter and he becomes irate. Why is he so mad? Yeah, he's like, well, how am I supposed to do it? Like, I'm not God. I can't heal anybody. And he's right. He couldn't do it. And he's not thinking in terms of, there's a prophet of the one true God that can do it. He's just thinking, I can't do it. And so what does he believe about the king of Syria at this point? Exactly. He thinks that the king of Israel, a king of Syria, is using this to try to, as an excuse to start a war, basically. In other words, he sent me this guy that he knows I can't heal. He's sending a request to me that he knows I can't meet, so that when I don't meet that, that demand, then he's going to use that as a cause to go to war with me. That's not at all what was taking place, but that's what the king of Israel thinks. All right, question? Yes, sir.
There's some strains of leprosy that are not contagious. Because Naaman sounds like he's fairly
Yeah.
active in dealing with people, or dealing with.
Well, at least at one point he was. To what extent he was at this point, was he still, actively leading a command in the army? I don't know if he was at this point or not, but yes, there are some that are not contagious. Whatever strain he had, it was bad enough that he was willing to make a trip to a foreign nation and basically grovel in front of a prophet of a foreign deity to get healed of it. So it was a big deal, pretty big deal to him. I don't know the exact strain that he had. I don't know that he necessarily was still leading a command at this particular time that this takes place. He was, he was a great and honorable commander that had gained a lot of notoriety at one point. But perhaps somewhere along the lines in his adventures, he had caught leprosy, and that becomes his downfall at this point. Yeah. Yeah, and you can see where the king of Israel would think he's just trying to pick a fight. Because, they're sending in raiding parties, presumably, to kind of test our weaknesses, and he thinks, so now, the thought is, well, he's decided that he has enough strength to go ahead and conquer us, so he's looking for, some excuse as to go to war. Leaders feel a need to just have some sort of excuse, even if it's not a good one, to go to war. Even Putin, he had some sort of excuse as to why he was justified in invading Ukraine. Well, he wasn't justified in invading Ukraine, but it's like we have to have some sort of excuse. I think maybe to try to validate it to your own people. You have to have something to tell the moms as to why you're sending their sons to die in a foreign land. And so, we made this request and he didn't follow through, and so we have to attack. That's what the king of Israel thinks. That's not what's taking place, but that's what he thinks. All right, let's look on verse 8. So it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes. Now, Tearing your clothes was a sign of grief, repentance, remorse, sorrow, that kind of thing. And so by him doing that, he's demonstrating grief, sorrow, desperation, that kind of thing. That's the idea there. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel." Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became furious and went away and said, "Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spoke to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. All right, let's take a look at this. So Elisha hears that the king of Israel has torn his clothes. He's in great desperation over this request of the king of Syria. And Elisha says, "Well, don't be upset, king. I'll take care of it. And here's why I'll heal this Syrian officer, and here's the reason that I will." And what does he say? Yeah, so that he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. Now, implied in that is what? If you know there is a prophet in Israel that can heal leprosy, implied in that is that you also know what? Yeah, that this is a prophet of the one true God who is healing it. So it's not just that Elisha's name will be glorified in this, but the Lord's name would be glorified in this. Now, Naaman goes to Elisha's front door with his horses and his chariots and his gifts and all this pomp and circumstance. And Elisha sends out a messenger. And the messenger says, "Okay, Mr. Naaman, sir, the prophet says, go and dip yourself in the Jordan River 7 times and you'll be healed." And Naaman goes away angry. There's a lot of fury in this. King of Israel's mad, Naaman's mad, everybody's mad in this story, but they get happy before it's over with. But why is Naaman mad at this? Exactly. I mean, it's too simple. It can't be that easy. It just seems he doesn't believe, he doesn't believe that the cure will work because it just seems too simple. Yeah, you're right, and that's what he says. We have better rivers than this in Syria. Why would I go down to Jordan to wash? So there's really about 3 reasons as to why he gets angry with this. First of all, he's mad that Elisha doesn't come out personally and meet him. He just sends a message. Sends out a servant through the door. I want all this trouble. And, the least he could do would be pay me the respect to come out and actually greet me. So he's mad about that. He's mad that Elisha doesn't pronounce some cure over him, because that's the way it was done. I give you my offering and you pronounce some, hocus pocus mumbo jumbo over me and pronounce me clean. And then, by the time, you get home and realize you're not really healed. I've already spent your offering. I mean, that's how it worked back in those days. I'm not sure that's not how it works these days too with some of these faith healers, but that was how it was done in those days. So he doesn't come out and he doesn't pronounce a cure over him. But beyond this, now think about it. Think about it. What's in the back of his mind as to what really is irking him, is making him mad at this point? He sends a servant. That's true. All right, think about this. Syria and Israel, are they allies? They're enemies, right? And so they've already sent raiding parties in. Now you've got the enemy coming, humbling himself, and coming to the doorstep of the enemy. An Israelite, right? And he's like, I've got a problem. Can you please help me? And what would most people do if they're enemies? Most of the world, if their enemy came, I'm not saying what would you do, I'm saying what most of the world, if their enemy came to them and said, I have a problem, I need you to help me, what would most of the world do? Yeah, sure. And if I had the chance, what would I do? Kill you or make fun of you, for sure. And so, in Naaman's mind, this is Elisha's way of just sort of poking fun at him. Oh yeah, Mr. Syrian commander man. Oh yeah, we can take care of it. You just go on down there to the river and dip in it 7 times. You'll be fine. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, you get what you deserve, didn't you, Mr. Syrian man? Now, that's not what Elisha's motive or point was in all of it. But Naaman expected that because that's how the world responds. And that's how the world still responds, by the way. That's why when we do as Christ commands and we love our enemies, it blows their mind. One of the greatest testimonies to a lost person is if their enemy, as a Christian, shows love instead of retribution to them. It'll blow their mind. But in his mind, he thinks that Elisha is making fun of him, so he's furious at this point. But his servant says, "Look, man," I'm doing my own little paraphrase of it here, but he says, "Look, man, if the prophet had said do something difficult, wouldn't you have done it?" Well, sure you would have. So why not do it? What is it going to hurt? Just go dip in the river 7 times. What's it going to matter? What's it going to hurt? So he goes down and does it, and sure enough, he comes back healed of this leprosy. Well, that's all it took for Naaman to become a believer. Now, we've seen kings of Israel through our Elisha study that saw far greater miracles than this, and they weren't believers, but that's all it took for Naaman, the pagan, to become a believer of the one true God. Now, let's look at verse 15. He returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him. And he said, "Indeed, now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now therefore, please take a gift from your servant." But he said, "As the Lord lives before whom I stand, I will receive nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, "Then if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth, for your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. Yet in this thing may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon," which is a false god, "may the Lord please pardon your servant in this thing." Then he said to him, "Go in peace." So he departed from him a short distance. All right, now there's some theological challenges in this that we'll take a look at, being the good Bible students that we are, and see what that is about. But first of all, let's look at this. Naaman offers Elisha a gift after he is healed. Why did he offer this gift to Elisha? Well, I mean, possibly, but who's he paying? That's not a bad answer, but my question is, who is he paying? Who is the gift ultimately for? There you go. So the thought is he is so grateful for the healing that he wants to do something as a thank you. Now he obviously doesn't know how to give this to God, to the one true God, and so he gives it to Elisha, God's representative, because in his way of thinking, to give something to the representative of God is the same as giving the gift to God. One Christmas, it's been several years ago, I preached a Christmas sermon on what are you going to give Jesus for his birthday? And there was this little 5 or 6 year old kid in there in the service. And that night, I was filling in for something. I think it was my home church, and I was filling in for my home church pastor. But anyway, this woman comes up to me that night, and she said, my son called his name. I don't remember what his name was. He made this card for you. And I said, oh, okay. And it said, happy birthday. He said, well, and I started looking at it, and she's like, yeah, it's a birthday card to Jesus. He went home, he listened to your sermon, and he said, I need to give Jesus something for his birthday. So he made him this card. He said he couldn't figure out how to give it to Jesus, so he just decided to give it to you. I said, well, okay, that works. I'll tell Jesus that I got it for him, So anyway, I think I kind of see Naaman the same way, I want to give something to God. I don't know exactly how to do that, so I'll give it to God's representative, and that is, in a sense, the same as giving it to God. But Elisha doesn't play by them kind of rules, and he turns the gift down. Why does he refuse the gift? Yeah, so he doesn't want to in any way give the appearance that he is a miracle worker for hire kind of thing. That his message, he doesn't want his message or his ministry to be characterized by money. The idea being that God's blessings can't be bought. Boy, you compare that to a lot of churches today and how they operate. We would do well to study 2 Kings chapter 5. But Elisha wanted there to be no hint that in some way he could be bought, influenced, the blessings of God could be bought, anything like that is the idea. And so Naaman says, okay, and if that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be, but I do have a couple of requests. And one thing he asked for is 2 mule loads of dirt to take back home to Syria. Now, what in the world does he want with 2 mule loads of dirt? Exactly. So he's going to take that and he's going to go make an altar so he can worship the one true God back home in Syria, because in that day and age and that way of thinking was that a deity could only be worshipped on their native soil. So if this was Israel's God, then he could only be worshipped in Israel. Or, the bypass of that is to just bring some dirt from Israel back home and make me an altar and worship him there. Now, we look at that and we say that's kind of silly. I mean, God is God of the universe. He's present everywhere. I can worship him in Syria. I can worship him in Israel. I can worship him in America. I can worship him in Iraq. I mean, God is God. I could worship him on the moon if I were there. But in that day and age, in that way of thinking, you had to worship the God on his native soil. Now the other thing, so that's not so hard to buy. That's not so hard to get. The next little part is where we get our little theological thorn bush, if you will. And we need to sort through it to make sure we fully understand what's being taught here. Naaman's second request is this. He said, I'm asking that the Lord would pardon me when I go in with my master to this foreign temple to worship this foreign God. And when my master kneels down and he's leaning on me, that I kneel down in this foreign temple to this foreign God. I'm not going to be worshiping that foreign God. I'm going to be worshiping the one true God. And I want the Lord to forgive me, pardon me for this. And Elisha says, go in peace. Now, there's a lot to this. First of all, I would say this. It is a tremendous statement of faith that someone from a pagan nation and a pagan background would say this. That I believe there is only one true God, and it's the God of Israel, Elisha's God, and that's the one that I'm going to be worshiping. So it is a tremendous statement of faith. The sticking point seems to be his request that I want to be able to go into this pagan temple, kneel down before a pagan idol. I won't really be worshiping the pagan idol, but it will appear as though I do, and I want that to be okay. And Elisha responds, go in peace. Now, what do you make of that?
He would be required by the king to go with him into that temple.
True. So if he refused, he could have been killed or whatever, imprisoned. He could have suffered that fate. That's true. He doesn't. So Elisha doesn't really say it's okay with God. And if you notice, Naaman doesn't say, I want God to be okay with it. What he says is, I ask that God would pardon me. In other words, he seems to understand that this isn't the right way, this isn't the preferred way, the accepted way. What he says is, I want to be pardoned. Also, Elijah doesn't say, go ahead, God doesn't care. What he says is, go in peace. So in other words, basically that's just a farewell greeting at that point. But there is some implication in Elisha's words that don't fret over this. God will meet you where you are. It seems to be the implication there. So what are we to make of that? Does that mean that if we want to, if we're called on to do something uncomfortable, if we're called on to do something that expressing our Christian faith would create an uncomfortable situation, that we can pretend that we're not really a Christian and that's okay? Is that what we're to take out of this? No. There you go. That's right. Yeah, so what we're not to take out of this is that somehow that if we're put in an uncomfortable situation by being a Christian, we can just somehow pretend that we aren't really a Christian and or behave as the pagans would, and then that'll be okay. What I think we have here is that you have a pagan man with a pagan background who has just made this incredible statement of faith. And Elisha seems to accept his faith where it is and allow him to move forward in grace. Elisha doesn't say this is okay with God, nor does he say it's not a sin, nor does he say it's the ideal, but he says you may go in peace, that God will accept you where you are and grow you into who you need to be. And I think that is the message that we can take out of this, is that, when we come to Christ, we're not the soldier of faith from day one that we ought to be, or that we will be by the time God is finished with us. But God accepts us where we are and grows us forward in grace. And I think that's what you have as a picture here. Yeah. You start, it's not, when you come to Christ, it's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the journey, and God takes us where we are and grows us from there. Questions on those verses? All right, I gave you a couple of little application questions here. Here's the first one. Billy Joe McGuffrey. Billy Joe McGuffrey is a highly successful entrepreneur. As he approached middle age, Billy Joe begins to contemplate his eternal destiny. He reaches out to a local pastor asking how to go to heaven. And a week later, he receives an envelope from the pastor containing a gospel tract. In a huff, Billy Joe throws the tract in the trash and dies lost. How has Mr. McGuffrey made the same mistake as Naaman? It seemed too easy. There's got to be more to it than that. He thinks it can't be that easy, right? What is he looking for? Give me some kind of religious process to work through. Give me a workbook to do. Give me 10 steps to eternal life. Give me something. Give me some sort of religious work to process to work through. Yeah, like the is it the rich young ruler? I don't want to mix stories. I think it's the rich young ruler who comes. That may not be the rich young ruler. The guy that comes to Jesus and says, "What must I do to?" That is the rich young ruler, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Rich young ruler comes to Jesus, says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And he says, "Well, keep the commandments." "Oh, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that." "Well, what do I still lack?" Well, take all you have, sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me, and you'll have riches in heaven. Well, he couldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. I'm convinced if Jesus would have said, give 10% of everything you have to the poor and come follow me, he would have gladly done that. But to surrender it all was a price too big to pay, a hill too great to pay. Exactly. And so for Mr. McGuffrey, it would seem that he wants some process to work through. So he can. You get that? Not so I can surrender my life to Christ and beg for His grace and mercy, but I can somehow work my way to God and earn it, because everything else in life He's worked for and earned. Salvation should be no different in his way of thinking. And he's probably a little miffed at the preacher that the preacher didn't, come see him and pronounce something over him, Blessed my child, you are forgiven, kind of thing. He just mails back a tract. Was there enough information in that tract for Mr. McGuffrey to get saved and go to heaven? Sure. If you sent him the right tract, there would have been. All right. Now here's another question, kind of also from our study tonight. Your friend is a Christian, but she works for a Buddhist-owned company. Each week, all the employees go to the Buddhist temple and pray to Buddha. Your friend goes as well and pretends to pray to Buddha so as not to offend her employer. And she cites the story of Naaman that we just read tonight as biblical support for her decision. I want you to evaluate her decision theologically. Is she on the right track or not? No, not at all. Exactly. The New Testament is clear that Christians should not shy away from taking a stand for Christ. Jesus said, if you're ashamed of me before men, I'll be ashamed of you before my Father in heaven. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And here's the thing. Naaman was an Old Testament pagan. We are New Testament Christians. Now, I'm gonna get this. If you don't get anything else I say tonight, get this. New Testament Christians are held to a higher standard than Old Testament pagans. We just are. People misunderstand this. They think, oh, well, we're saved by grace through faith. We're not under the law. We're free. So, it's pretty much anything goes. We don't have a standard to live up to because we're covered by grace. What does Paul in Romans say? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we who are dead to sin live any longer in it? So it's not as though as Christians we have a lower standard. As Christians we have a higher standard. We're not under the law. That's true. We're under a higher standard than the law. What does the law say? Thou shalt not kill. What does Jesus say? Don't hate. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's what the law says. What does Jesus say? You don't have lust in your heart. Don't steal is what the law says. What does Jesus say? Don't covet. You see? So we're not under a lesser standard. We're under a higher standard. All right, and I give you a couple little, here's your bonus, Give yourself 5 extra points if you can get these two questions right. 5 each, 5 points for each question. Here's the first one. What movie made by talking vegetables featured the song Billy Joe McGuffrey? You can't answer. Anybody? VeggieTales, but which one? It's their only, to my knowledge, full-length feature film. Huh? They had another one? Okay. Well, I think it was their first one. It was about a fish, a big one. Jonah. VeggieTales Jonah. All right. And then here's the other one. I said in my question that Billy Joe McGuffrey died lost. Whose fault is it that Billy Joe McGuffrey missed heaven? Ultimately, it's Billy Joe McGuffrey's fault. He had all that he needed to come to saving faith in Christ, and he chose to throw it in the trash. So he can't really blame God or preachers or anybody else for the fact that he missed heaven. He's to blame. Now, let me say this. I also think that to some extent the pastor is probably culpable in some ways in this, because you have a man who is questioning his eternal destiny. He wants to talk to a preacher about being saved, and your response is, a week later to mail him a tract. I think that's kind of a little bit of a cop-out, and us really not doing our due diligence. And I would say that whether it's a preacher or anybody who's supposed to be a Christian, if you have somebody that's wanting to talk to you about coming to Christ, and your response is just to, send a tract to them. Not that a tract is a bad thing, but a conversation is a better thing. So I think that it's culpable. I've had people tell me, and I've asked this question, sometimes to adults, but especially when I was doing youth ministry, like, if your friend came to you and they said, how do I become a Christian? What would you say? Meaning, let's practice you sharing the gospel. And their response was, I'd tell them, go talk to the preacher. Okay, well, if you do that, can I just say, like, if you have somebody that comes to you and says, hey, man, I'm worried. I know I'm lost. Can you tell me how, I need to know how to be saved, how to go to heaven when I die. And you say, oh, well, just go talk to the preacher next time you're by the church. Okay, if that person dies lost, that person is responsible, but to some extent you are too. You have that. If you claim to have Jesus, then you ought to be able to tell somebody else how to have him. And if you pawn that off on somebody else and that person dies lost, don't think that you're not going to get out of a very awkward conversation with Jesus when he looks you in the eye and says, I want you to know that Billy Joe McGuffrey is in hell today partially because of you. Now you think, oh, I'm in heaven and everything's going to be good and everything's going to be great. Yes, it will. But that conversation is not going to be a fun one to have with Jesus. So anyway, I'm going to be quiet because I sound too much like an old Baptist preacher when I say that. I don't know. Anyway, all right, so I have a treat for you tonight. All right. How many of you have ever seen the Jonah VeggieTales movie? One. All right. So I'm taking one of you, only one of you have ever heard the Billy Joe McGuffrey song, right? All right. I'm going to play, as we close tonight, I'm going to play the Jonah VeggieTales Billy Joe McGuffrey song for you. It's about 3 minutes, so let's go ahead and play that now.
Joe McGuffrey was a really clumsy kid. On the first day of first grade, I'll tell you what he did. He tripped over a pencil box, flew up in the air, landed on a kangaroo, pulled out all his hair. He needed first aid in the first grade. First aid in the first grade. First aid in the first grade. You could buy a zoo with all the doctors. Oh, Billy Joe McGuffrey was a really clumsy kid. On the second day of second grade, I'll tell you what he did. He slipped on a banana peel, flew up in the sky, landed on a chimpanzee who poked him in the eye.
Where's Route 59?
First aid in the second grade. First aid in the second grade. You can buy a zoo with all his Dr. Billy Kane. Billy Joe McGuffrey was a really clumsy kid. On the third day of third grade, I'll tell you what he did. He fell out of the living room, splashed into the sea, landed on a bird, he hit him on the knee. He needed first aid in the third grade. First aid in the third grade. First aid in the third grade. You can buy a zoo with all the Dr. Busy Kane.
I get to meet Twippo.
12th grade!
Now, Billy Joe McGuffrey was a really clumsy kid. On the 12th day of 12th grade, I'll tell you what he did. Walked into financial aid, fell and broke a bone. Showed him all his skills and got a great big college loan. He needed first aid in the 12th grade. First aid in the 12th grade. First aid in the 12th grade. You can buy a zoo with all the Dr. Busy paid. You can buy a zoo with all the Dr. Busy paid.
Yay! Let's do another Twippo song!
I played that for Trey earlier, and he told me, he said, that's like every youth trip we've ever taken. So anyway. All right, I've enjoyed studying with you tonight. Like I said, next week, caroling, and then we'll be off a couple weeks, and then we'll pick back up. we're not done with Naaman. We get to kind of finish the story and add another character, the character of Gehazi, next time. So that'll be a good story as well. Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for